If you've ever been to therapy, you know the vulnerability is of like sharing just like raw stuff. And sometimes like you're sitting there, with your therapist and you're crying. And I would, because these times have been so sacred and, a lot of times it does feel like group therapy, people have shared really raw stuff, people have cried. I just think that some level of empathy of like, hey, yeah, I've been there. Like I've been to a therapist and I've done that stuff. And I think that there's kind of I just wanted that level of empathy. So if you have not necessarily been to therapy before, but you want to lead, just talk to me and, send me a message. We can chat a little bit, but that's really kind of my rationale behind it. So I really want it to be an opportunity for you to lead. And at the same time, really, I think the thing that I want most is this is not like a preaching session at all. This is really like a time to connect. And I never want it to necessarily be where it's like talking at people, and that's kind of why I put the sort of prerequisite of desiring for you to have gone to therapy. So in my desires to want to be a professor, but I'm not going to be a professor, I have my slideshows. I said, screw the PhD. I don't want to do the PhD. So we're actually going to be talking about something I've been doing one-on-ones with sub-2 students since, I don't know, maybe like January or December or whatnot. This one topic actually comes up and I realize, I need to speak on it. Again, same kind of rules, if you will, or just reminders. Take notes if you'd like. Please apply one thing, again, similar to what Pace always says about, just consuming content. We're not really actually going to grow and develop if it's just consuming and listening. Again, I really consider it sacred time. Please encourage one another. As always, this is going to be recorded and posted. So I'm actually going to be talking about boundaries today. And I've actually talked about this topic a lot in my actual work with my patients and clients. This has been something that has come up a lot in my conversations with you all. And, most of us are relatively new to the real estate investing space, and just pursuing anything new and pursuing dreams. Of course, we're going to be met with some doubt by our friends and family, right? So these are some of the conversations that I hear a lot. I hear a lot of people that are experiencing judgment and criticism from their friends and family, right? People are criticizing me. People are trying to say that I'm just trying to make fast money. They don't know what I'm doing. My father says this one a lot. He says, "Oh, you're taking too many risks. The market's going to crash." And I had this really interesting conversation where I said, "How are your stocks doing?" And he got, kind of defensive, and he was like, "Oh, that's different." And I was like, then I actually challenged him. I said, "Do you actually know what your stockbroker is doing compared to, if I were to, borrow some of your money and invest it in real estate?" And I thought, what, I don't even know why I'm trying. I've never been able to change my father's mind. But it's just one of those things where it's like some people that even use that last line of like, the market's going to crash. It's like, then where the heck are you actually putting your money that you feel it's actually safe? Because my husband's friend lost $200,000 in stocks because of, the war and everything. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, people say these things and it's like, as the saying goes, like, you don't know what you don't know. I know a lot of people have experienced criticism. My husband's adoptive mother literally said, "Are you sure that the house that you bought is actually real?" And we laughed and we're like, oh wow, like this is the mindset that we're fighting. And I said, don't even try to share. What's the point, right? That was a pretty funny comment. That was more funny than it was like we were offended by it. So there are ways that you can deal with judgment, right? So many of you I have spoken with have said, well, I just try to prove them wrong, right? You can try to do that, right? You can try to debate them and argue with them. I've tried to do that with my father. I'm not going to do that anymore. If he asks, great. I'm just going to post my wins. And it feels really uncomfortable. It doesn't feel normal to me to do that. But at the same time, what's really cool is that I'm getting attention from my friends and other family members, like my brother, who's like, "Hey, I'm following Pace. Like, can you get me a deal or let's invest together?" I'm like, that's awesome. And my brother and I are really close, but it's like, I think just being able to do that and like just prove in other ways, but not necessarily debating and arguing, but just showing your wins and showing proof of concept, right? I think is a more powerful way than trying to argue with them, right? But if you're going to try to argue and debate, you have to ask yourself, like, is your time and energy being expanded, and is your energy being increased by arguing with them, or is your energy being exhausted? And that's, time and energy are the two most precious commodities that we can't necessarily get back, right? And so you really have to ask yourself, like, when you're trying to battle criticism and judgment, is it something that it's worth your energy to try to argue with them? right? Or just continue on your journey and surround yourself with people in the sub 2 family that understand and believe that it's possible and support you in doing it, right? The better solution, I really feel, are boundaries, right? But I think, there is a prerequisite to boundaries. I firmly believe that without necessarily knowing these things that I'm about to share, it's going to be really challenging for you to develop boundaries, communicate your boundaries, and then try to maintain your boundaries, right? So the first thing that in asking before you actually even develop your boundaries, the question that I would ask you is like, do you even know what it is that you're protecting and why? And so asking yourself these questions, very first prerequisite of developing boundaries is you have to know your value, right? Without knowing your value, how do you even know why you need to protect it, right? And to be honest, like I'm on this journey myself. Like everything that I share in my Mindset Zooms are things that I have either done and spent a lot of hard work and effort trying to work on myself, and or I'm literally experiencing it now. And my parents are going to be coming over in a couple hours, and this is going to be really interesting because we're going to be I'm going to have to, kind of communicate boundaries with them constantly to protect my family, to protect myself, right? And then another question you really have to ask yourself is your time and is your value, do you feel like it's valuable, or do you feel like you and your time are disposable, right? And you really have to ask yourself these questions before you develop your boundaries. Otherwise, you're not going to really know why you're protecting yourself or what it is that you're protecting, right? So I have a really funny story. I am not like a fancy jewelry person. I have this really cool ring from Tiffany's. This was in Southern California when I was with my brother and sister-in-law, and I was coming through a pretty tough season of just some personal challenges. And you can talk to me later about it if you want to, but I had gone through a season of just like depression, anxiety, and there were a lot of people that had, personally, I had a family member that actually had tried to take their own life and didn't succeed. And so I went through this season of like really just trying to save the family from a lot of the grief that was going on. And then on top of that, I was working at a pediatric inpatient hospital. And so I actually ended up taking a medical leave because I was going through a lot of depression and anxiety just around that season of like a lot of death, a lot of suicidal ideations with my patients. The reason why I bring that up is I didn't know my value. I was giving my time freely, way too freely to many different people and things that really at the end of the day I didn't know how to protect myself. Like I had just kind of let myself go way too much in terms of not really knowing my value, letting my energy go to the point where I actually had to take a medical leave from work. Fast forward to me being in a better season, in a better place. My sister-in-law, she takes me to Tiffany's. We're at the mall and I'm like, oh, I've never like stepped foot in Tiffany's before at all. But the funny thing is that we go to the counter and she sees this ring, and then she like kind of runs out the door, like approaching my father. My father's like right outside the door, but he's like kind of outside of the store. And so my sister-in-law is like, she took the ring, she's like running towards the exit of the doors with the ring, but she's wanting to talk to my dad, like to try to convince my dad to buy it. But the funny thing is that like, guess what ends up happening? Like all the security is like just like chasing after her, and like all these like security guards like just enter, or they actually like block her off. They're like, whoa, what are you doing, right? And this is a really weird long story, but the point of the story is that Tiffany's knows the value of what they have, right? Their diamonds, their jewelry, all their everything. Look, I mean, if you even look at the pictures, like they have all their jewelry is protected, and they have security guards, they have video cameras, like everything, right? They know their value. I've been using this analogy of like, do you believe that you and your own value and your time and energy do you consider it to be a level where it's like Tiffany's level, or do you consider you and your time and your energy, do you consider it more like swap meet level? Because a lot of us, like, and me included, like I've done that before, where I've treated myself and my time as kind of swap meet level jewelry, right? Where it's just kind of out there and people are like taking it and taking it and taking it. And if we're going to really pursue real estate and focus on our energy and using it wisely, I think that we have to know our value and protecting ourselves from the people that are going to either mistreat it or judge, maybe make us feel like we're swap meet jewelry when we're actually, the value of Tiffany's. And that's something that really, I think you have to look within yourself and take a really deep look and introspection of who you believe that you truly are. I would really believe that's like how God created you to be. It's like, do you value that to that degree? Or Are you letting people treat you like swap meet jewelry? Or do you even look at yourself as swap meet jewelry, right? I'm going to, kind of close with a couple of quotes, but this one was really powerful. It says, love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and your energy are precious. You get to choose how you use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. That last part, you teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. And without developing boundaries, and I think really, when we talk about upfront contracts, right? To me, that's all about just communicating and creating boundaries and setting clear expectations, right? And that's essentially what boundaries are, right? You know your value, you create a boundary, you communicate the boundary, and then you have to maintain it. I think, I told you guys that I went to the mastermind. I had actually two really, really powerful one-on-one conversations with Pace and with Daniel Quijano right before the mastermind. That was like a pre-mastermind talk with them. Two other quotes that I'll share with you. Pace, this wasn't necessarily verbatim, but Pace had said, people who talk shit and complain are revealing their own issues. They're projecting their own excuses of why they're not as successful. Don't waste your time with those people. They'll fade out or be pushed out. And I had an amazing conversation with Daniel Quijano, and he said, to get darkness out, shine your light brighter than the darkness. Don't waste your energy trying to make the darkness become light. And those have been two powerful things that I've really kept close to my heart as, I go through these conversations with, my dad, who doesn't really necessarily believe in what we're doing, or he never capitalized on real estate. And we live in the Bay Area. So if you know anything about the Bay Area in California, like he just never felt, he's always had a scarcity mindset, basically. And I've really had to break through that. And it took me, I turned 40 last year. It took me that long to really decide, hey, I want to do this. Another thing with boundaries is, again, it's you have to be proactive in doing it. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is that you get into debates and arguments because you become reactive. And I'm pretty sure that most of you guys know already the people in your lives that probably are naysayers and don't believe in what you're doing. And so you really have to be proactive in creating a plan, right? And creating a plan and communicating those boundaries. So again, step one is you have to know yourself and know your value, and then create a proactive plan to protect yourself and your energy and communicate those expectations and letting people know, like, hey, I'm going to continue to do real estate. I believe in myself and I believe that I can do this. It sounds like, I don't want to fight with you about this. If you don't really want to support me in doing it, that's fine. I'm not looking for your feedback. And then it's like, if they continue, it's like, hey, you know what? Like, I've already communicated that I'm not necessarily looking for your feedback. It's going to be one of those things where if you continue, like, I'm just going to have to create more space between us. Again, so the goal of creating boundaries is not to control the other person. And that's a key thing that I want to remind you about, because we have no control over other people. But what we can do is communicate our value and letting people know what is or is not okay to do to and for us and with us, right? And so again, you can't control them. You can't say, you better stop doing that. Stop talking shit to me. Stop, stop, I don't need your criticism, right? Like, they're not going to listen, right? They don't know what they don't know. Really, at the end of the day, the boundaries is not to control the other person, but it is to let them know of your value and to let them know that if they're not going to respect your boundaries, then it's time to create more space, right? And I've done that before, with friends and family as well. And it's really, really, really hard. You have to realize, like, your own value and your worth, and that it's worth doing that. Or you could just waste a lot of your time and energy trying to debate and argue with people, but it's going to really sidetrack your goals, right? I think that, my discussion questions, the things that I would really love to connect with you guys on right now is, what is the cost of not protecting yourself? Kiki had shared, a really powerful post about a conversation that she had with Pace. And, Pace was saying something like, you're being a thief to your own family. It was a powerful conversation, because I was like, oh, she realized that she wasn't protecting herself. She was doing a lot of the loan modifications for free for a lot of the students because she's just an incredible go-giver. But at the same time, she realized, like, wow, she was being a thief to her own family, right? Another question that I want to ask you is, like, who is crossing your boundaries and exhausting your energy? And if you feel comfortable enough sharing, like, I would love to kind of hear your process of that, and, like, we can talk and we can develop a game plan if you want to, right? I just think it's really important to be able to develop these boundaries and to communicate them, really, because, not to sound cheesy, but it's like, you're worth it.